the Storrs meeting, yeah, I guess maybe there aren't too many people left, who were there, but I remember a group getting together in somebody's apartment. I think it was a student apartment over there, and we had to make the decision whether to have the meeting at the gun house or the parish house. And we decided, since we were Quakers and pacifists, we better go to the parish house and not the guns house. And there was the gun family living in this little apartment, and the parishes had a big house and a nice big living room, and it seemed appropriate, so that's where we started, in the parish house, in their home. But then the next place that I remember was the music studio right on Route 195. That was a room that was very bare.
And clearly there was nothing of ours there. We sitting on folding chairs in kind of an awkward space. It wasn't even a square room. It was, as I recall, some kind of an L-shaped room, and pretty cramped, so that it was a little harder to really, I think, settle in, a little less inviting to worship.
The place we met for years after that was E.O. Smith's home, right on Route 44. It was a big old house, beautiful old house. It had clocks in it, grandfather clocks, shelf clocks, all kinds of clocks. And at the end of the hour, they all struck the hour, so you sure knew it was the end of meeting.
We started renting this building here when it was still a cooperative nursery school. This building was originally built as a cooperative nursery school sometime in the 50s. And we rented it just on Sundays. In fact, we shared the space with the nursery school, and we had to sort of pack up and push aside all the nursery school kids' stuff so that we could sit in this room here.
We always had two children. I remember Barbara Rosen had two dear little girls who would come and sit quietly. And Howard and Robert said, his two little daughters, they came. We never had an awful lot of children. We didn't really have a first day school back then. We just, the children, if they were too little to sit, then someone played with them.
Eventually, we bought the building, still shared it with the nursery school. Eventually, I think it dissolved of its own accord, and then we were able to use the building much more freely ourselves. But that made it easier for children to come, families with children to come here, because obviously there would be a separate space and you could start a separate program.
And the children met for what we call first day school, which is called Sunday school, downstairs, but it was right below the meeting room. So there was, and remember this was the 60s and 70s, so there was always some tension about keeping the children quiet and less exuberant, so there could be silence upstairs.
The question of involving the children in the life of the meeting is always a difficult one, and once we started having children, become much more aware of how difficult that was, and Jacqueline and I, of course, were then involved in the first day program, both teaching and just watching our kids and that kind of stuff. And the challenge that we had as our kids were growing up was sufficient number of kids to be able to have a viable, ongoing, sort of really rich program for them that would give them some grounding. But I think that the meeting is always really been accepting of children and wanted to have children involved, and from time to time we had to remind ourselves of that and how important that is, and how we might do it and whatnot. But I don't think there's any question that we've always seen children as part of the community, and obviously now with the space we have now, again, we've made sure that there really is adequate space so that they really can have programs that will be important and meaningful and nurturing to them. but at the same time trying to think of ways that we can involve so that there isn't just, us up here and them down there, but they're all part of the same community.
And I think some of the, later on in the 60s and early 70s, there were a group of kids coming to Storrs Friends meeting who, and I know a lot of them, because they're adults now, that went to high school together too. The meeting wasn't so spread out as it is now.
When I was first becoming a Quaker, was during the Vietnam War, and the Quakers in Storrs, as in most parts of the country, were clearly deeply involved in the Vietnam War, and trying to raise consciousness about that. And there were lots of folks who were involved with the meeting because they were attracted by the activism over and trying to promote peace rather than war.
We did a lot of just sometimes silent witnessing against the war, but also passing out pamphlets, that talked about the issues in the war. Didn't argue with people. But there was at that time members of the meeting who were very quote unquote radical, and they were advocating washing, I can't remember whether it was washing the American flag or burning the American flag, and it was, the meeting never did that, but the mere fact that it was brought to the attention in the meeting brought a lot of tension.
Each person, I think, had a project. We came together, got inspired with, what am I to do, and asked in the silence, and each person would get an answer. And alone, I can remember there was a couple working in Willimantic in social action there all by themselves, and they said, well, we can't worry about the war and all these other things because we're so up to here in what we're doing. We're doing all we absolutely can, but it was individual.
There's always a ferment. There's always something going on of people having their leadings and making a stand for them.
I know. I have learned, and my horizons have broadened tremendously coming to this meeting in terms of social issues, in terms of efforts to promote peace, help with various social causes. Certainly the gay, lesbian issue was quite foreign to me until it came up here and was explored very fully, and was very helpful, tremendously helpful. This is a great place to learn about the community and the people in it, and the varieties of people and the varieties of problems here locally and in the world. We have people who are very up on issues that might not run into in any depth elsewhere. And it's all in a spiritual vein, and so you're not hammered over the head with something. You have to believe this, and this is right, and that's wrong. The issue that the Friends' way is to encourage inner seeking and working out what is meaningful and what comes to you as truth and reality and spiritual wisdom. Sometimes it takes a long time.
Changes in the business structure of the meeting. Of course, it has, in the business structure, it has grown from a budget of just $3,000 or $4,000 to a budget of about $30,000 now, which is still not a great deal, but considerable growth.
the basic structure is very much the same, because it's just the way Friends generally do. We have a clerk, and we have an assistant clerk, who sort of oversee the meeting in a general way, and then there's we don't have a minister, of course, so we have a committee which changes with time.
Going to one business meeting, it was so slow. It's very slow because we have to get everybody to agree or to say, it's okay, let's do this. And so I would think it was, I just can't stand this. It's too boring, it's going on and on. So a friend of mine, Mary Reed, as she was then, said, it's okay, this is a chance for you to practice what the Quaker way is, that you think about it during the silence or inspiration, or you don't think, it just comes to you. And this courage to do things, or patience to allow this to happen, and understanding of other people's point of view, and all these things. Now we have business meeting, which is a place you can go and practice it.
Well, the meeting has grown quite a bit. I guess when we started, it was only about 6 to 12 people, and now it's around 80 members.
Obviously, there's something to be said for the intimacy of a smaller group. But I don't feel like even on a day when we've got 35 or 40 folks sitting together in worship, I don't feel like that's a big group. I think the size of our membership really contributes to the quality of our worship and doesn't detract from it.
The quality of worship, I think, depends a lot on the individual and the participants. But I think it's always been good. The small meetings, there were times, I recall a meeting with the three of us there. I remember at least one where it was just the Steinbergers and me. But it was wonderful. And now, of course, we have a very large meeting, and that makes it perhaps sometimes a little more active, and perhaps a few more distractions, but on the other hand, you have more spirit, I think, or at least more input of spirit with a larger meeting.
I've been to lots of meetings. I've been in meetings in Colorado, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and other meetings here in Connecticut, Washington, D.C., Boston. This meeting, interestingly, for me anyway, has always had a quality of sincere gatheredness.
Meeting's very meaningful for me to go and sit in the silence and feel the energies of people.
Storrs Friends meeting has been my cutting edge of growth spiritually, because to be with a group of people and to go to that deep place within is not something to be taken lightly, and it's a challenge.
Well, clearly I've been involved in the meeting now a long time, and it's really an important part of my life, of our family's life, and I hope that I have grown in some spiritual depth in those however many years it is. Certainly. The meeting is responsible for that. I mean, the meeting is the vessel which holds that for me, and I'm sure that if the meeting were not here, if I had not found Quakers when I was at Earlham, my life would have been profoundly different than it has been. So.
I don't know what my life would have been like without this meeting. I certainly would have missed it. Maybe I wouldn't have known I missed it. That's been wonderful.
In meeting, the phrase relax into the silence came to me, and as I repeated it over and over, I dropped off my burdens and sank into a deeper level of consciousness, where all was peace and quietness and rest. From this wonderful level, I spoke on Fenelon's Guide to True Peace, which is one of the books I've been reading that week. That here is a state in which we find answers, not the big unknowable ones like why war, why suffering, but little answers like a determination to do right as far as we can, and then have patience. Through cultivated inner peace, we find courage in fear, solitude in company, peace in war. We relax into the silence, hoping for these blessings. Such refreshment and rest I found in meeting, and even now, whenever I remember that hour, I relax and feel strong. That gives you an idea of what it has meant to me all these years. All the wonderful hours of finding some kind of foundation of strength underneath everything we do. And the Quakers are good at that. It's a wonderful group. And a great thing to be involved with.